Revelation chapter 12, I'm trying to cover a chapter a night that I'm here on these Wednesday nights, and we're moving through the book of Revelation rather quickly. And tonight we've got a lot of ground to cover, so you've really got to listen on purpose because I've got a lot of material. And we may get a little into the weeds tonight, all right? We may go just a little deep in a Bible study. May say some things that some of you have never heard before. And so you just got to stay with me tonight is what you got to do. And if I get to seeing that your eyes are glassing over, then we'll just cut it in half. But we'll see it. But I'm trying to get this what I'm trying to do. We've come all the way to the tribulation of the seventh trumpet judgment. I believe that when we get to Revelation chapter 12, we are very near to the end. When that seventh trumpet is blown, that seventh trumpet judgment, it unleashes the next wave of judgments that are represented in the vial judgments. Now, that seventh trumpet was actually blown in chapter 11, verse 15 down to verse number 19. That's when the seventh trumpet blows. However, nothing happens until chapter 15. So chapter 12, 13, and 14 is another one of those parentheses that we are accustomed to seeing in the book of Revelation. Now remember that a parenthetical passage, it is a pause in the narrative to give the writer some additional information that he feels like that the reader needs to know at this point. So the seventh trumpet is blown and the Holy Spirit tells John to pause. And in chapter 12, 13, and 14, he's going to go back over some territory that has already been covered, and he's going to give you some information that he thinks you need to know at this particular point. Now, what we're going to read in chapter 12 is a very wide, sweeping panorama of not just prophecy, but also of history. There's a summary here of the history of the nation of Israel, which is then tied into the future. And woven into this whole story of God, or this whole narrative is the story of God and man, the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness. And here's what the chapter is going to do. The chapter is going to take you back to a time before creation. Then it's going to skip a whole lot of time, and it's going to end up in the tribulation. There are 7 main characters in chapter 12 and 13. I'll give them to you. And these are the 7 characters that we're going to look at. In verse 1 through 5, there is a woman. In verse 2 through 5, there is a child. In verse 3 through 17, there is a dragon. In verse 7 through 9, there is Michael the archangel. In verse 14 through 17, there is the remnant of Israel. Then in chapter 13, you have a beast, which is the Antichrist. And you have a beast, which is the false prophet. Now, with that intriguing introduction, let me get right into the text. And the first thing I want you to see in the text is there are wonders in heaven. Wonders in heaven. And there are 2 wonders. There's first the wonder of the woman. Look in Revelation chapter 12 and verse number 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pained to be delivered. Now, there's 2 wonders. There's a woman and there's a dragon. The wonder of the woman, and I wanted to call it Wonder Woman. I didn't feel that'd be appropriate, and so I'll not. There's a little controversy over who the dragon is. But Bible scholars stumble all over themselves trying to identify who is this woman. Now, she's not a real woman because no real woman has a moon under her feet and 12 stars as a crown above her head. So it's imagery. It's not a photograph. It's an image of something that the woman represents. You may know the name Mary Baker Eddy. Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of Christian Science religion. Most of Hollywood elites would be Christian Science. Well, Mary Baker Eddy said that she was the woman. Christian Science is the child that she gave birth to, and the dragon is the mortal mind. Mary Baker Eddy had absolutely no clue as to who the woman is. The Roman Catholic Church, they fancy themselves as the sole interpreter of the Scriptures. They don't have a clue who the woman is either. So the Roman Catholic Church says that the woman is the Virgin Mary, since she gave birth to the Christ child. In verse 5, there is a child. There is no doubt that child is Jesus Christ. And so the woman travailing in birth has to be Mary. So in verse number 1, they would say that that is her assumption into heaven. If you have ever seen an image of the Virgin Mary standing on the moon with the sun around her and the 12 stars around, that's where they get the image from. Now here is the problem that I have with it. In verse number 14, this woman is going to flee into a wilderness for 3.5 years. And for the life of me, I cannot find where Mary ever spent 3.5 years in a wilderness. And see, this is always the problem with Catholic theologians. They always quit reading too soon. If they would ever just read the next verse or finish the chapter, then it would help them in their theology. Now, most Protestants, they don't do a whole lot better in trying to identify the woman because they believe that the woman is the church. The church. Now, I'm not giving you all of the reasons why they're wrong. Here's the biggest problem with that is that the church didn't give birth to Christ. Christ gave birth to the church. So the woman is not Mary Baker Eddy. It is not the Catholic Church. It is not the church. It's not all of these things. I'm just going to let the cat out of the bag because I don't have time to tease it. The woman is Israel, all right? Now, I know that because the prophets often described Israel as a woman travailing in birth as she brings forth the Messiah. Micah chapter 5 and verse 2, "But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me," that's to be ruler in Israel. Verse number 3, "Therefore will he give them up until the time that she which travaileth hath brought forth." Romans 9, Paul talks about concerning Israel, of whom concerning the flesh Christ came. So the woman is Israel. Now, this woman is pictured as being surrounded by the moon, the sun, and 12 stars. Now, you may be thinking that kind of sounds familiar. And it does. Because in Genesis chapter 37, Joseph has a dream that's very similar. Do you remember his dream where the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down before him? And in that dream, the sun represented his father, Jacob. And the moon represented his mother, Rachel. And the 11 stars were his 11 brothers. So here is the exact same image, except in this passage, it is 12 stars, not 11. Joseph himself being the 12th star. So that imagery represents the nation of Israel. Now this woman has a child. We saw that in verse 2. Look at verse 5. "She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne." Verse 13. "When the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child." No doubt the child that comes from this woman is Jesus Christ. There is no other person that fits the description, and there is nobody that has been hated as much as Jesus Christ by Satan. Now look quickly at verse number 5. "And she brought forth a man-child." That's the incarnation. "Who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron." Watch this. "And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne." That's the ascension. Now you may remember I've told you a couple of times that there is such a thing in Bible study called gap principle. That sometimes there are two statements made. It sounds like that there are two events that are right next to each other, but in reality there is a gap of time between those two events. You see that in prophecy a lot. That's what you have in verse 5. "She brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, colon." And that colon represents the 33 years of his ministry on earth, though nothing is said about it. So in verse 5 you have his incarnation and you have his ascension. You have the wonder of the woman. There is a second wonder in this chapter. It is the wonder of the dragon. Look at verse number 3. "There appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. His tail drew the third part of the stars to heaven, and the stars of heaven did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. There is absolutely no question as to who this dragon is, because verse 9 identifies him. Look at verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So the first thing I notice is that Satan is described as a red dragon. Now that's not describing what he looks like, but it's a description of his character. He's like a dragon. Just like Israel is pictured as a woman, so Satan is pictured as a dragon. Now that gives me a problem. Everybody knows that dragons are mythical creatures. The only dragons you have ever read about are in children's books or some Greek mythology, but everybody knows that dragons are not real. But then most people don't believe that the devil is real either. And I wonder if Satan has any influence on Greek mythology, Chinese mythology, to condition people's minds that dragons are mythical creatures. But maybe dragons aren't real. Well, let's study our Bible for just a minute. Are you up for it? Job 41, let's go. Job chapter 41, all right? We're going to run some references here real quick. Job chapter 41. Job 41, you should be there. We don't have time for you if you don't know where it's at, you're just going to have to act like you do. Job 41 and verse number 1, here we go. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with birds, or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? Now, Job chapter 41, and we'll read the rest of the chapter in just a minute, but Job 41 describes a mystical, not mythical, but a mystical sea creature. He defies all men. He's full of pride. And again, commentators try to determine what is Leviathan? So one commentator says, in fact, this is probably the most popular answer, is that Leviathan is describing a whale. It's a big whale. And somebody said, no, it's a crocodile. That's a crocodile, that's what's being described. You read about its scales, and it's a crocodile. Somebody else says, no, it is clearly a hippopotamus. That's what it's describing, trying to describe it. Somebody else says it's a dinosaur. Christian scientists and all of this, it's a dinosaur. I don't think that anybody actually knows what a dinosaur looks like. But it's a whale, it's a crocodile, it's a hippopotamus, it's a dinosaur, it's a nothing. It's just mythical is all that it is, all right? He's describing this mystical sea creature. Now hold your finger right there, go to Psalm 73. Psalm 73, and I'll pick up a couple of little details about him. Or Psalm 74, I'm sorry. Psalm 74, look at verse number 13. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. Thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the waters. Oh, dragons. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. So I've got new information now. Leviathan has multiple heads. Do you see that in verse 14? He's a dragon, and he has multiple heads. Now, everybody that guessed that it was a whale, a crocodile, a hippopotamus should have read. You have never seen a two-headed crocodile. So it can't be any of those things. Look at Isaiah 27. Isaiah 27. Pick up a couple more little details about this Leviathan, this dragon in the sea. And Isaiah 27 and verse number 1. Now, verse 1. In the day that the Lord with his sword and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Now, the context of Isaiah 27 is the second coming of Christ. You see that in verse number 6. He shall cause them to come of Jacob to take root Israel shall blossom and bud and fill the face of the world with fruit. You see that in verse number 13. Talks about him coming. So Isaiah 27 is talking about the second coming. So when he comes, he's going to slay Leviathan, who is called a serpent and a dragon in the sea. That doesn't mean he's going to come and kill all the crocodiles, because he doesn't like crocodiles. That's not what he's talking about. But there is a particular dragon, there's a particular serpent that's called Leviathan, and God's going to destroy him when he comes. Come back to Isaiah 70, or back to Psalm 74 real quick, and I'll pick something else up here. Psalm 74 again in verse 13. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength, and thou breakest the heads of the dragons in the water. Thou breakest the heads of Leviathan in pieces, and gavest him to be meat to the people inhabiting the wilderness. It's written in the past. It could be prophetic. And people in the wilderness are going to be fed or given sustenance when Leviathan is killed. Come back to Revelation chapter 12. You still with me? Revelation 12, look at verse number 7. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. It doesn't give us the name, but here we have a personality that is a serpent and a dragon. It's the only other serpent dragon in the Bible. And by the way, Psalm 74 says he has multiple heads. Isaiah 12 and verse 3 says he has multiple heads, just like Psalm 74. So here, Satan is clearly identified for me as Leviathan. I know who he is. I know what he's like. I know what's going to happen to him. And the creature in Job chapter 41, I believe, is Satan in one of his many forms. Do you remember in Isaiah chapter 14 when he sinned and fell from heaven? In his original state, he was the anointed cherub that covered. Ezekiel 28 describes him as being covered with all of these beautiful stones. But when he fell, I don't think he's still the anointed cherub that covers. I don't think he's still the most beautiful creature that God ever created. He appears as an angel of light, but Job chapter 41 pulls the cover back and reveals Lucifer in his fallen state. By the way, it's interesting to me that in the book of Job, all of Job's friends and Job's wife accused God of causing all this pain. Job cursed God and died. They all said that God was against him. But in chapter 1, it is clearly laid out that Satan was the one who created all of the pain in Job's life, even though at the permission of God. But no one ever says anything else in the book about how bad Satan is. It's all about how bad God is. So at the end of the book, God pulls the curtains back and gives you an image of Satan as he really is. And no wonder he wants children to believe that dragons are not real. Because he's a dragon. He's a dragon. He would rather you badmouth God than to know what he's really like. Come back to Job chapter 41. Let me show you something. Come back to Job 41 and look at verse number 8. Lay thine hand upon him. Remember the battle. Do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? God is speaking to Job, and he's comparing his power to that of Leviathan. And no one is able to stand against Leviathan, so then who is able to stand before me? And implied in all of that is that you are no match for Satan. This dragon is so powerful that none dare stir him up. Look at verse 14. Look at how he's described. Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are his pride, shut up together as with a close seal. One is so near to another that no air can come between them. They're joined one to another, they stick together, they cannot be sundered. By his sneezing, that's like sneezing, a light doth shine. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. His neck remaineth straight. Sorrow is turned into joy before him. The flakes of his flesh are joined together. They are firm in themselves. They cannot be moved. His heart is as firm as a stone, yea, as hard as a piece of the nether millstone. He's scaly like a reptile, and his body is very strong, and no weapons of man, in verse 26 and 27 and 28, can be formed against him. And he breathes fire out of his nostrils. This is a fire-breathing dragon. Now, you can read this and say that, well, that's just a myth, but God doesn't deal in myths. God is describing a real dragon to Job. And this dragon in the sea is more powerful than any man who has ever lived. Can I go deeper? All right, look at verse 31. He maketh the deep to boil like a pot. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. He maketh a path to shine after him. One would think the deep to be hoary. Now, where exactly is the deep? If you go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, you would discover there is a deep above you, and there is a deep below you. Hold it right there. Genesis 1. Genesis 1. Go. Genesis chapter 1. Genesis 1 verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Now, a lot of people, when they read verse number 2, they are assuming that that means the ocean. The ocean is not created until day 3. That deep is not the ocean. Now, I don't have time to teach the whole lesson again. But Genesis chapter 1, if you will read it carefully, run down to verse 7, verse 8, verse 9, that what God does is there is a earth that is submerged in water, and on day 1, what God does is he separates the water above. He creates a firmament, and he creates the water. He separates the water above the firmament and the water below the firmament, and the water below the firmament, he makes dry land appear, and those waters he calls seas. But there is a body of water above the firmament. Right now, above the heavens, there is a body of water. And the Bible calls it the deep. The deep. Genesis 7. Genesis chapter 7. I'll prove it to you. Genesis 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. There is a body of water beyond the firmament, and it's called the deep. So, back to Job chapter 41. According to Job chapter 41 and verse 31 to verse 33, Leviathan moves through the waters of the deep, and he stirs it up in his path. Water is usually translucent, you can see through it. But when it's stirred up, it becomes opaque, and you can't see through it. So when he says in verse 32, one would think the deep to be hoary. It's cloudy. It's frothy because something is stirring the water up. So you have to determine which deep is Leviathan moving through. Is it the Gulf of America? Don't you love saying that? I don't know that it has helped us one bit. Hadn't put a penny in my pocket. I just like saying it. I think that in verse 31, when he's talking about the deep, is not the deep like in the Pacific Ocean. It's that deep that's above. That's where he operates. Job chapter 41 says that none on earth is like, who is made without fear. He maketh the sea like a pot of ointment. Look at verse 34. He beholdeth all high things. He is a king over all the children of pride. The most prominent characteristic of Leviathan is pride. He's the king over all the children of pride. Does that not remind you of somebody? I will be like the Most High. I will ascend. Does that not remind you of somebody? Isaiah chapter 14. It reminds me of Lucifer. Now you can take this all at face value. You can say it's mystical. I take the Bible as it is. And I know that there is symbolism in Revelation, and there is symbolic language, even speaking of Satan. And sometimes we don't know what is symbolic, and sometimes we don't know what is literal. But I believe that when Lucifer fell and was banished as the anointed cherub that covered, that God changed his physical description. He is not that beautiful, magnificent creature that is described in Ezekiel chapter 28. He is an ugly, terrifying dragon that traverses the deeps in the heavens with access to the throne of God as the accuser of the brethren. But one day, during the tribulation, God is going to cast him down to the earth, where he will wage war on earth as he's been waging war in heaven. And when he is cast down upon this earth, I believe that the world will gasp in horror as God allows them to see him as he truly is. He appears as an angel of light because he didn't want you to know what he truly is. I won't get into this because it's 7:50 already. There is, sometimes I believe things that I just believe, but I don't preach them. I don't have enough verses. I got one verse, and so I don't preach it. But it doesn't mean that I don't believe it, all right? You have things that you believe that you can't prove either. There is an argument to be made that he has a form in the water and he has a different form on dry land. I'm not even going to get into that tonight. Satan shows up in Job 1. He is never brought up again in the book, and all through the book, God is blamed for what happens to Job. And at the end, chapter 41, God exposes him as a dragon, a serpent, a beast, and the whole world's going to see him like he really is. Come back to Revelation chapter 12. Are you still there? Are you still there? You two are still awake. What a blessing, all right? Revelation chapter 12. Look at it again in verse 3. There appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. I'm going to take that phrase right there, and I'm going to set it aside, and I'm going to deal with it when we get to chapter 13. But notice, his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and to cast them to the earth. Stars are angels. There's all kinds of ways to prove it. All right? In Job chapter 38, morning stars and sons of God rejoice at creation. Revelation chapter 1, the 7 stars are called 7 angels. So stars are angels. So there is a third of the stars of heaven, the angels of heaven, that are cast to the earth. Now, when did that happen? Well, verse 9 speaks of a very similar event. He's cast out into the earth, and his angels are cast out with him. Now, I'll show you in just a minute, that is very clearly future. So most people say since verse 9 is future, verse 4 has to be future as well. I believe that verse 4 is the original fall of Satan, and I believe verse 9 is the future outcast of Satan. Now notice, here's the purpose of the dragon. In verse 4, the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. What you're given is you're given this panoramic view of history. The Messiah is going to come out of Israel. Satan, who fell from heaven, is going to attempt to stop him. It's not something that's going to happen just in the future, but it's the story of the ages. And all throughout the scriptures and all throughout history, you see this battle between Satan and Christ. And even before he was born, Satan is making every effort to just stop the seed that would come. Do you remember Genesis 3:15? Do you remember? I will put enmity between thee and between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. And Satan knows that, and he's been trying to stop it ever since. So Satan inspired Cain to murder Abel. The dragon is seeking to destroy the child. It was Satan who schemed for the sons of God in chapter Genesis 6, for the sons of God to marry the daughters of women. And it was Satan trying to stop the seed from coming. It was Satan who inspired Pharaoh to kill all of those male babies of Israelites 2 years and younger. And it's the serpent seeking to destroy the child. It was Satan who tried to exterminate the royal seed, 1 Kings, and they destroyed all of the seed, but they left one boy alive. It's that dragon trying to destroy the child. It was Satan who inspired Herod to order that all the babies born in Bethlehem are to be killed when Christ was born. It is the serpent, it is the dragon trying to destroy the child. The Mount of Temptation, the ministry of the Lord, the Garden of Gethsemane, it is Satan trying to stop that child from coming. There is a battle. And so we get back to Revelation chapter 12, and this dragon is trying to devour the child. Now, let me ask you a question. If there is a battle between a dragon and a child, who would you think wins? Who's your money on? I mean, a dragon, a real dragon, and a child. Well, we all know that a child has no chance against a dragon, right? So that's what verse 5 is for. It's to tell you who wins. And what this verse does is it takes you, as I said, from his incarnation to his exaltation. Here's a snapshot of this battle between the dragon and the child. And I'll just give this to you quickly. And I preached this years ago, and I'll just give it to you. But Satan could not harm him because he came. She brought forth a man-child. For 4,000 years of history, Satan schemed to try to keep that child from being born. He sets brother against brother. He deceives the world so that there are only 8 righteous to be found in the earth. And he murders innocent children time and time again. He tries to destroy the nation. He's trying to stop that child from coming. But after every evil attempt, she brought forth a man-child. There he is. And then Satan could not halt him, for he conquered. He fails at stopping the birth of Christ, so his next is to try to destroy the life of Christ. So the Nazarenes try to take him and cast him off of a mountain. And demonic forces beset him on every hand in the Gospels. And there's diseases, and there's devils, and there's disasters. But you know what he did? He invaded death at Calvary, and he tore his bars away. Then he rose in victory, having spoiled principalities and powers, triumphing over them openly in the cross. And now he's sitting at God's right hand of God, interceding for you and I. She brought forth a man-child, watch this, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. He's winning. He's winning. And then I said this 30 years ago, Satan could not hinder him, for he controls. He rules all nations with a rod of iron. It takes place in the end of tribulation, but it's going to happen. And verse number 6 gives you one proof of how you know that Christ will be in control even when Satan thinks he is. Because the nation of Israel in verse 6 has to flee when the Antichrist violates his covenant. Satan's going to launch one final attempt against them. And God tells you ahead of time. The length of their exile is 1,260 days to a place he has prepared for them. Basically, what God's doing in verse 6 is telling the devil, I'm telling you right now, you're going to lose. Because I'm setting the time and the place. So verse 5 covers the past, covers the present, covers the future. Wonders in heaven. How we've rushed through that. But notice, secondly, there is war in heaven. Verse 7, there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So here's what's described. There is a war in heaven between Satan and his angels and Michael and his angels. Now, that's about the last place you'd expect to find a war in heaven. But there is a war in heaven. And it's Michael the archangel who is fighting against Satan. By the way, do you remember one of Lucifer's boasts in Isaiah chapter 14? I will be like the Most High. That was one of his boasts. What irony. The name Michael means who is like the Most High. And I think that it just has to gall Satan every time that he encounters Michael, because his name reminds him of his empty boast. Now, there is a battle. It's been waging for ages. I know that it was ongoing in the book of Daniel because it's talked about there. There is spiritual warfare going on even now. Now, what is this battle over? What is the conflict between Satan and Michael and his, what is it over? And I have two thoughts on that, and I think that I'm right on both of them. And the first is that I think it has something to do with Israel. The battle is ongoing. It's intensified during the tribulation. Satan's cast to the earth. When he's cast down, he launches his final assault against Israel to try to destroy that nation. And I think this war in heaven has something to do with Israel. When he fails in heaven and he's cast down, he retaliates by trying to destroy the nation Israel. There is another thought. There's another thought. It's a Fellure-ology thought, all right? And I'll give it to you. But during the tribulation, the church is in heaven, right? We're gone. One of the things that happens during those 7 years while we're in heaven is the judgment seat of Christ. Surely it takes place during the first part of the tribulation. So by the time in the great persecutions of the great tribulation, I think the judgment seat of Christ has already taken place. Did you know that Satan has access to heaven as the accuser of the brethren? He does. He's our accuser. He is our adversary. He's going to be cast out some way halfway through, so presumably still has access to the throne. Now, please don't go and repeat this. Tell anybody that I believe this. Well, that the judgment seat of Christ, could it be that Satan is there? Could it be? And could it be that as God is rewarding his children, Satan's accusing? He's accusing and slandering and he's accusing. And can you imagine how infuriated Satan will be when when Christ has judged the church, he pronounces it without spot and wrinkle. Oh, how that would have to gall the devil. And he starts handing out rewards to you and I. And Satan's just a human. And could it be that that is when Michael is dispatched, get him out of here, and banishes him to the earth? Really, you could outline the history of Satan by a series of falls. God said in Isaiah 14 he would be brought down. He is cast out of heaven to the air. Then he's going to be cast out of the heavens to the earth. Later, he's going to be cast out of the earth into the bottomless pit. And at the end, he's going to be cast out of the bottomless pit into the lake of fire. There is war in heaven. Thirdly, I'm done. There is wrath on earth. Come back to Revelation chapter 12. When Satan's kicked out of heaven, finally, there are two responses. I can't cover them all, but in verse 10 and 11, there is a glad proclamation in heaven. In verse 12, there is a grim proclamation on earth. Look at verse 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea. For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. He is going to be cast out of heaven. He is going to be cast to the earth. And when he does, he's going to be furious. And he's determined to get revenge against God. He can't touch heaven. And he can't touch the church. So he's going to go after the only thing left that God treasures. And that's the nation of Israel. And that is when he will command the nations to unleash the greatest assault yet against Israel. He knows his time is short. He knows his doom, but he's not going to go out without a fight. If you've ever killed a snake, you know that a snake that seems to be dead is still dangerous. You can cut a snake in half, and the head of that snake can still bite you. That's why when you kill a snake, you have to crush his head. And that's exactly what God's going to do. Verse 13, I'm hurrying. When the dragon saw that he was cast into the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. Israel becomes enemy number one. They are the vehicle through which salvation comes to the world. And so Satan knows that Jesus Christ, when he comes back to the earth, he's going to establish his kingdom, that it will be with the Jewish nation, that the kingdom will be established. There is a Jewish remnant that will welcome the king back, and Satan knows that, and he hates Israel for it. So if he could destroy Israel, then maybe he could thwart Christ from coming back. So he wages a war against Israel like no other. Look at verse 14. And to the woman were given two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. So when Satan is banished from the earth and he unleashes his final campaign, the remnant of Israel is going to flee. For the first half, they enjoy false peace, covenant with Antichrist. But when Satan comes, Antichrist is Satan-inspired, and Satan's going to instruct him to break that covenant. And now here the war comes. And the time frame is given in two ways. If you back up to verse 6, Israel is going to flee into a wilderness for 1,260 days. That's 1,260 days. That's 42 months of 30 days each. 42 months is 3.5 years. When you get to verse 14, you have time, that's 1, times, that's 2. So now we have 3, and we have half a time. We have 3.5. Very simple to figure out that Israel is going to hide for the last half of the tribulation. Now, the place that Israel is going to flee to, I'm hurrying, is called a wilderness. And in verse number 14, she's going on 2 wings of an eagle. So now we've got to find out what the wings of the eagle are. We interpret the Bible literally where we can, but this cannot be taken literally. Otherwise, you've got a great big eagle picking up a couple of million Jews, flying them into a wilderness. I don't think that's what it's talking about. The phrase most likely indicates that they're going to run away like an eagle flies, swift and strong. And you might want to put down Exodus 19 and verse 4, ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and know I bear you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. It's a metaphor of God's deliverance. Then in verse 14, I just got to show this to you. Right? I'm just skipping a bunch of stuff. Verse 14, to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness into her place, where she is nourished for a time and times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Last half of the tribulation, Antichrist breaks the covenant. Satan cast down the earth. War is waging. Israel, the remnant, is going to flee. They're going to flee to a place. And the Bible says that she is going to be nourished where she flees. Now, how is she going to be nourished? By the way, during this time, only those who have the mark of the beast can buy or sell, right? Got to have the mark of the beast. They're not going to take the mark of the beast. So how are they going to be nourished? Do you remember how I told you that sometimes I believe things that I don't preach? I got a verse, maybe 2, not sure. It's just something that I believe, just me personally. I would never preach it. How did God nourish Israel in the wilderness the first time? I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying. In fact, I'm not saying it at all. One more thought. Can I be done? One more. Can you take one more thought? Y'all are still awake. Good. One more thought. Where are they going to hide? Where are they going? Well, I think I know. Micah 5 and verse 2. I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Bozrah, as the flock in the midst of their fold. They shall make great noise by reason of the multitude of men. I believe the specific place that Israel will flee to during the tribulation is a place called Bozrah. That's the Hebrew name. The Greek name is Petra. The Greek name is Petra. It's called Petra by the Greeks because it is a city that is composed of buildings that are made out of rocks and cliffs. In Hebrew, the city is called Bozrah, which means sheepfold, which means it resembles a sheepfold. And an ancient sheepfold would have a very narrow passageway going in so the shepherd could count the sheep as they were going in. And then as they went into the sheepfold, it opened up to a large circular area where the sheep would have more freedom of movement. That's exactly what Petra looks like. There was a very narrow passageway, about a mile long, that goes into the city, and then it opens up into a huge circular area. I believe that the specific place that the remnant is going to go hide in is Petra. Now, Why would they go to Petra? I wonder why. I think I know. Daniel 11. Can you find one more verse? Daniel chapter 11. Are you still here? Daniel chapter 11. Petra is in an ancient territory that was called Edom. And there's something fascinating about Edom. Edom is modern-day Jordan. Something fascinating. Look at Daniel 11. There's Daniel 11. See if I can put this together. Daniel chapter 11 and verse 41. I'll read the verse and I'll give you the context. He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab and the chief of the children of Ammon. If you'll read the context of Daniel chapter 11, verse 36 down, it's describing the conquest of the Antichrist in the middle of tribulation as he begins his political takeover. And while the Antichrist gains political control of the world, there will be three ancient nations who will escape his domain. And they are Edom, Moab, and Ammon. All three of those nations are what are now modern-day Jordan. Now, why is that? Because Basra, Petra, is in Jordan. It's the only place that the Jews will be able to flee to. That's where they will flee. And God is not going to let Antichrist have control. By the way, it's 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Did you know that when Jesus Christ comes back at the second coming battles, the battle of Armageddon, one of the first places he's going to is Basra. In fact, I'm not too sure that Basra is not the first place that he comes to when he returns. Now, Acts chapter 1 talks about when he ascended from the Mount of Olives. And the angel said, "This same Jesus was taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as you've seen go into heaven." Zechariah chapter 14 talks about when he comes down, he shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. And so they say, well, then he's coming back to the Mount of Olives. Well, the verse in Acts 1 does not say he's coming back in the same place. It says he's coming back in the same manner. It's different. Furthermore, if we had time to go to Zechariah chapter 14, we don't. The verse that talks about Jesus standing on the Mount of Olives, the verse before it talks about the Battle of Armageddon. The sequence in Zechariah 14 is backwards. It's Battle of Armageddon and then him standing on the Mount of Olives. So it's very possible that Christ descends somewhere else first, makes his way to the valley of Megiddo, then ascends to the Mount of Olives, victorious over its absence, and then that mountain splits open, makes a way to the eastern gate right into Jerusalem. It could be. Isaiah chapter 34. Isaiah 34, and I promise you, I'm done. Isaiah 34. See if I can tie some things together here for you. I'll show it to you. The remnants in Basra. They're waiting for him to come. Isaiah chapter 34. And I won't read all of this, but Isaiah 34, if you begin verse 1 all the way down to verse 7, it's declaring to the nations that God has indignation against the nations and their armies, and they're destined to be slaughtered with the sword. But where will the sword of God strike the armies of the nations? Look at verse number 6. The sword of the Lord is filled with blood. It is made fat with fatness, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord hath a sacrifice in Basra, and a great slaughter in the land of Idumea, Edom. Oh, he's coming to Basra. There's going to be a slaughter there. Look at Isaiah 63. Isaiah 63. I'm hurrying. Isaiah 63. Again, I won't read all the verses, but just look at verse 1. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? This that is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of his strength. I that speak in righteousness, mighty to say, wherefore art thou red in thine apparel, in thy garments like him that treadeth in the wine fat. I have trodden the winepress alone, and of the people there was none with me, for I will tread them in mine anger, and trample them in my fury, and their blood shall be sprinkled upon my garments, and I will stain all my raiment. Isaiah stands on a mountaintop, and he looks down through time in the land of Edom, and he sees a magnificent blood-stained figure approaching him in glory and splendor, and his garments are stained with blood from a battle, and the battle is in Bozrah in verse 1. It's in Bozrah. He fought this battle to save his people. Zechariah 12, I promise you, it'll be the last verse that we look at tonight. Zechariah chapter 12. This is fascinating to me, all right? And look at Zechariah 12 and verse 7. The Lord, watch this. The Lord also shall save the tents of Judah first, that the glory of the house of David and the glory of the inhabitants of Jerusalem do not magnify themselves against Judah. Tents are temporary abodes. They're not permanent dwellings. And the fact that Judah is living in tents shows that Judah is not living in Jerusalem. They are dwelling somewhere else, and that elsewhere is Bozrah. And Messiah is going to come to them in the tents of Judah first. He's going to save the inhabitants there first before he goes to Jerusalem. I believe that the armies of the Antichrist are going to march against Bozrah in an attempt to eliminate the Jews that are there. They have destroyed Jerusalem, and their campaign is to completely eliminate Israel. And I believe that the armies march toward Bozrah to finally exterminate the Jews. And when they get there, they will meet their greatest nightmare. The Messiah will meet them there and will begin the slaughter of the armies of the world. And it seems that the battle of Armageddon actually begins at Bozrah and continues in the valley of Megiddo. And Isaiah sees him coming out of Bozrah with blood-soaked garments, not going into it. By the way, among the first casualties is Antichrist. Yeah. I don't have time. I told you no more verses. But you ought to go to Isaiah 14 yourself. All right? And you know the passage about I will be lifted up, but you ought to read Isaiah 14, verse 3 through 11, and it describes the day that Antichrist is cast into hell. And as he enters into hell, all of the great ones of the earth that are there are going to be shocked that he's there too. And then you ought to read Isaiah 14, verse 16 through 19, because it describes Antichrist's fate of his body on earth. And many people are going to be able to view his body, and they will stare in disbelief that this mighty world power dies so easily and so quickly. The earth trembled in his presence, and there he lies. Well, that's enough. It's enough. I get wrapped. I try not to get into the weeds, but it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me trying to put it together. Amen. We win. We win. Aren't you glad?